This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. We're featuring today my favorite poet, maybe the only poet in existence at this point. I mean, kind of a cross between the comedian Steve Wright and the Romanian philosopher E.M. Cioran. His volumes, slim as they might be, are the Inertia Variations, which Matt Johnson turned into a musical, the Hate Poems, which feature a sweet little kitten on the cover, and Antiepithalamia, and other poems of regret and resentment, which basically means the dishonoring of anyone dumb enough to become a bride. The burden of existence is John Tottenham's main theme. The pain of being alive, rising, knowing you're going to fail, and then eventually, though, having to laugh about it, because it's back to the Beckett quote, I can't go on, I'll go on. Ladies and gentlemen, John Tottenham. He'll be doing a short reading after this. This is the Lydian Spin with Tim Dahl, and today our featured guest is, well, maybe the only poet alive, but certainly my favorite. That would be John Tottenham. Hello, John.
Hello, thank you.
You're feeling rather,
no,
did you say feeble today
yes,
or frail?
Very feeble.
Well, get a little closer to that.
I am feeling very feeble today.
But isn't that your usual condition, my friend?
No, not really. Honestly, I lead a very regimented existence, and I've relinquished my autonomy this weekend.
How tragic. I guess you would have felt more at home if there was no one here, not even the dogs.
Yes.
You can contemplate that for a minute, John.
The desert silence is here.
I didn't sleep properly.
Well, get a little closer to that microphone. Don't make me force it down your throat,
Well,
please.
Lydia doesn't sleep much at all, so you're in good company.
I wish I could rub my strength up against your fragile being for a few minutes just to
I think we're going to make it.
Vibrate. You think you'll live for the next 45 minutes or so?
Hopefully. I mean, if I die during this podcast,
Well, I mean, that assumes that you're still alive, John. I mean, I think you've been in a state of permanent purgatory as long as I've known you, which has been, I guess, since 1983.
Well, you've taken a lot of breaks.
Well, I almost took your breath away, but that's just when I said on your... I didn't say that.
Well, can we? I'm curious.
Yes.
Can we start where at least the two of you met, and we can go further back later. But I want to know how the two of you met each other.
Oh yeah. Do we have to name dates?
You don't have to. No. But just a general time, general place.
So it was late 20th century.
That's fair.
In London. We were introduced. I think
it was Jessamy that introduced us.
Yes, our mutual friend Jessamy introduced us, or she. I don't know. I can't
Brought us together somehow. Why?
I think she thought we would both profit from the liaison.
Did we?
Yeah. Here we are.
Did we profit from their liaison?
It's 30 years later now.
Well, we're both still alive. I think you have some of your desert or LA existence. You can thank me for that.
Yes, I can. I rode into town on your coattails many years ago.
Well, it was more on my financial finagling of mega corporations in order to solicit funds for a needed excursion of your hobo nature into the poetics of... Did you go to the Deep South?
I did, yeah. That was I don't think we need to go into the exact details of how we financed that trip.
We don't need to go into... the limitations, but anyway, let's
Deep South of the United States.
The Deep South, yeah. I took this...
because you met in London.
Yeah, we met in London.
We met in London, but he had expressed the urge to go to America to be riding the rails and be a poet, and so I saw a man in need.
I know something about being a poet. That was a desperate last resort. That only.
Was it a gigolo you had in mind? I mean, what was your?
No. It was. I sort of decided not to do anything until I was 30. I thought just experience life, All right, and
gather the experience.
Then I kept dragging it out, and eventually I didn't really do anything until I was in my mid-40s, actually.
So tell me where you came when you went to America. So anyway, we.
Wait, whose last resort is being a poet? That's a very rare species.
It's the last resort of a failed prose stylist.
Whoa! All right.
Where did you first land in America? Tell me about that little journey. So, we create a situation which allows you to go and experience the life you desperately needed at that point, which was to escape the UK. And where did you land in America? What did you do? Tell me about that journey.
Well, that wasn't my first trip to the States.
No, okay, but it was. Come on.
I'd already made a couple of abortive attempts to move out here at that point. 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Before
okay, but we want to
here.
know about that trip that you took on my coattails.
Well, I arrived in Houston and took various forms of transportation up to New York, and it took about a month or 6 weeks or something.
Staying at motels, sleazy dives.
Yeah, all that crap. But I mean, I had a lot of money. It was, I think I'd run out of it by the time I got to New York.
You ran out of all that money in a month.
I stayed in Charleston.
How many prostitutes did you visit?
I stayed in Charleston, South Carolina, for a couple of weeks and hung out with these punks down there.
Oh yeah, there was punk scene there for a while.
There was. Yeah.
Well, I played a punk house there a couple of times. It's an interesting town. Beautiful town.
We rode. We drove up to DC together and saw the Last Minor Threat show, which held no interest for me whatsoever. And they were appalled that I wasn't in the mosh pit.
Couldn't imagine
Hugging
it.
a bunch of boys.
Couldn't imagine it. What kind of music were you into at that period anyway? I mean, were you into like old blues, or what were you listening
all that
to?
stuff, yeah. What
weren't
we
into
listened
punk
to...
rock. I was never into punk rock.
No, me neither. We listened to Lee Hazelwood and Tom Waits and old blues records and Merle Haggard. And
what was your favorite Tom Waits record?
It's funny, actually. Somebody had such a formative influence at me at...
I would say Nighthawks at the Diner,
yeah,
the
I
live
would
record.
too.
Well, better question, what's your favorite Merle Haggard record?
Pride in What I Am. But yeah, we all loved Tom Waits back then. I think
he was amazing back then. I mean, we loved him. Not everybody loved him, but I mean, poets loved him.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw Tom Waits live when I was 14, upstate New York,
Rochester?
in Rochester, and he had a street light, a piano, and I think an upright bass player, and that's it. He played the piano. And my only interaction with him was I was standing outside in the auditorium, and he's like, "Where's the John?
Where's the John?"
Which was so great. I never met him after that. I mean, I would have loved to. I love most of his work. I mean, Nighthawks at the Diner is just superlative poetry. And a superlative backtrack with just a splattering of the audience, a little piano. That was poetry then. So anyway,
So you made it to New York after...
So I went on this lengthy journey through the South, went through Mississippi and Georgia and various other
and you
states.
lived to talk about.
And... which I highly romanticized at the time to an almost absurd degree, in fact. In later years, I moved down in New Orleans for about 3 years, and I kind of got this obsession with the South out of my system. But at the time, I was obsessed with it, mostly, the mythical South, old blues records and Faulkner.
What years did you live in New Orleans, John?
Just after you. I think we just missed each other.
Tragic. That would have been grand.
94 to 96 or 7
we missed
or
each
something.
other then. Here we are again, though. We keep running into each other, not often enough, though.
And so have you, and if the answer is yes, which I should assume, maybe not, been back to London? Do you go back to London?
Very occasionally.
How do you manage to stay here? What kind?
That's not London.
Hey, we're not going to
We'll edit that out.
No, I'm a citizen. I'm a citizen.
Oh, okay, you're a citizen. Okay. Well, I'm just checking to make sure they're not going to, whatever.
No, there's nothing.
They have nothing on you.
No.
They're not going to build a wall around you.
Go back to London. I don't go back to London too often.
He's built a wall around himself.
I will only go there on professional business, which obviously only occurs very occasionally. Once every 10 years or something.
When did you actually start performing your work?
Well, when my first book came out, The Inertia Variations, about 15 years ago.
And all that wasted writing before, where's all that beautiful writing before that? I mean, you had volumes of incredible prose, and I mean, one of the things was you would send me these incredible pieces from the road. You said you still have my correspondence. I might have yours in my archive, but I've yet to locate them. But you are really one of the most beautiful prose writers, not only physically, of course, but absolutely incredible. So it took you until you were in your... to actually take... Why did you even take to... How did you take to the stage?
Well, I was called upon I actually made a few furtive appearances with you way back in the day.
Yes, you
I think
did.
we did some. It didn't
We did
go
a play
over well.
together.
We did a play together.
We did an
called
actual
Four White
play
Wolves.
at the Pyramid
We were
Club.
staying at your brother's pad up in Palmyra in New York, and we were just bickering one afternoon, and I started copying it down, and then we just turned it into a play and put it on the Pyramid
How did we
Club.
get to my brother's place in Palmyra?
I think we took a train.
I have
or
no
maybe
memory
a
of
bus.
that.
Wow.
Why did I invite you there?
I know. It's
What
odd,
did we
isn't
do
it?
when we were there?
We bickered, and I taped it. I mean, I copied it down
Oh, okay.
as we were bickering.
Were we enjoying the nighttime at least?
I don't recall any nocturnal activity there
Bickering.
whatsoever.
All right.
I can't imagine bickering with you. Was it just in our nature?
That means you
at
guys
the
had a
time?
good time, or you went to bed early?
I don't remember
He
anything
might
about
sleep,
it.
but I don't, so he doesn't know what happened. You've heard tell about what
Oh,
I
well,
occasionally do to
yes.
men once they're sleeping.
Yes,
I remember your brother. Your brother had a daughter, and we. I remember her bedroom. That's it.
Let's say no more about that. My brother excommunicated me after his adopted son asked for a book reading list, and I gave him a bunch of suggestions, and I sent him one of my books, which had a tale about my shifty father, and my brother read that, although he had the same father, and suddenly excommunicated and tried to ban my adopted nephew from contacting me, but hence I'm still in touch with my nephew, but not in touch with
well,
my brother.
and your uncle. I mean, he excommunicated you from him, but not the family. I mean,
Well, no, and he wasn't even my family, but I'm still in touch. And actually, who was at the time a young boy, he must have been 9 when we met him, became a landscape artist, and now he's a preservationist and conservationist and writes books and doesn't talk to my brother either, but that's another story. You're lucky most of your family is dead, so
I
is
think
mine.
they're all dead, actually.
Isn't that a success in itself?
so
In any event, so regarding, I fell into this whole poetry lark by default as a desperate last resort, as a failed prose stylist. All the material that I envisaged ending up in a massive prose undertaking, an epic novel, ended up whittled down into these shards of tiny poems.
reducing, editing. I mean, if it's just a reduction, that's maybe
but
much more.
I want to interrupt.
I should have embraced it earlier, honestly.
Well,
It's
I know.
like-
I think that you should go back to those long exposés and string them together, because there are people like myself who find great delight in things like the Celine or Henry Miller run-on sentence that goes on for 10, 20, or 200 pages.
I was an unabashed maximalist, and I embraced austerity.
Well, I mean, you like
Late
a
in
lot
life.
of list making. You know, there's all styles.
Exactly. Well, anyway, maybe it's time for you to read us a little poem.
be
That would be
careful, Alan.
fantastic right now,
Um,
actually. This is from your new book called
You
The
want one
Hate
from your
Poems,
book? Yes.
which has a lovely, fluffy little kitten on the cover, which just speaks volumes to the contrary nature of John Tottenham, my favorite poet.
I seemed to have always been the same age. Then I looked in the mirror and saw a tired and devious old man gazing warily back at me. An old man sitting alone in a room, masturbating over a memory, fantasizing about women who have forgotten about me, and brooding over deliberately missed opportunities. A shadow of my former shadow, slowly becoming invisible, turning grey. Unfortunately, nobody noticed that I never went away.
Oh, please, one begs for more. That's all I can say.
Yeah, we need an encore.
I mean, we do encore.
On a short one.
Well, take your time, darling.
Beauty and happiness. Beauty depresses me, knowing that it's temporary. Positivity requires too much energy. And even if I were happy, I wouldn't admit it. For that would be an insult to those who are not and those who pretend to be.
So, John, what were some of our early performances? Did I wrangle you into live performances?
You did, and I wasn't fit for it at all at the time. We did something, and I wrote some very sort of piece of romantic juvenilia.
Where would these happen in New York?
One was
LA?
in Dublin.
Dublin?
Yes.
I have no recollection.
We went to Dublin.
Together?
Well, you were over there, and me and Jessamy and maybe Jim actually came over.
That would be Thirlwell.
And also in Oslo.
I have no recollections.
Oslo.
I mean, how did I even... I must have been really on the art scam in those days if I could afford to bring you over and probably pay you.
It was Jim traveling.
I don't think we got paid, but we did.
You got paid to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can only give so much to an unknown poet.
You've
I would say
given your all,
comic. Well,
and
thank you.
And more.
Well, that's because I have so much to give. If only you could afford to take it all in. I'm not sure. I mean, as frail and fragile as you are, I know it can be somehow
And
overwhelming.
then we did that play in New York, which we called Four White Walls. I think you had a different title for it. You called it Four Ugly Walls.
Four Ugly White Walls.
Yeah, that's...
And it was just based on our bickering, which I can't even imagine that we bickered.
That's all it was.
I mean, but...
And with the what I was paid for that, I went to LA for the first time.
Well, see, I did pay you well then.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Enough for a plane ticket one way to get me out of New York.
Yeah, to get you away from me and the bickering. You didn't want to be put on stage in those conditions.
I think you were bickering with Jim at that point anyway.
Really, I must have been quite cantankerous then.
Now, last night you were claiming
Not
that
the jolly gal I've turned into.
you were taking credit, but you weren't quite sure that you introduced Lydia Lunch to Jim Thirlwell.
If anyone can take credit for that, it's me.
Thank you very much. I mean...
I can't remember strictly how it went down.
Well, I remember one thing.
He was a close friend of mine.
Jesamy's, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember reading a press release that Thirlwell wrote for the birthday party, and I needed one to be written for me, so I invited him over. Or, I don't know how this press release came to be, but knowing that they were friends, at the time Thirlwell was celibate. How long did that last? Well, I can talk anybody out of anything, just about, including their pants. And the rest is history. Or should I say herstory?
Yeah, well, you turned him into a rock and roll animal.
Well, thank you. It's true. It's true. Those early performances after, he wasn't so shy. I mean, he became suddenly an extreme exhibitionist.
Yeah.
Pig heads on sticks, bulging hard-ons, no shirt, black eyeshadow. What's missing? This was the perfect rocker.
Yeah, nobody who knew him up until then could have foreseen that development.
So I guess I'm responsible for, yet again, turning out another white male onto the stage where they do what they do best, which is to create out of their own insanity.
Yes.
This is the Lydian Spin with Tim Dahl. We're talking to John Tottenham, one of my favorite poets. And
That was your
around,
favorite 15 minutes ago.
Well, I mean, actually, I can't think of another one because they're all dead. You're barely alive, but still, I'm giving you credit for that. So L.A., so you come out to L.A., you escape New York and the bickering of our early friendship. It must have been a loving form of bickering, though. I mean, it was just conversation.
Do you have a copy of that still?
What?
That piece we wrote.
I think I do in my archives, yes. What, do you want to restage it?
No, that's okay.
I thought it was very Tennessee Williams for the time, but brings back too many. Thing is, I don't have memories of it. I know we did it. I don't remember Oslo. I don't remember Dublin. I remember putting you on at all tomorrow's parties.
I remember the Oslo business. Check this out.
Uh-oh.
See that scar there on my arm?
Yes, tell me.
Yep.
Right, remember that?
No.
What's that from?
That happened in Oslo.
How did it happen?
Because Jessamy, our close friend, and I had this long-running game of blackjack going on, which was a card game. And at some point, she decided that if she won, I was to forfeit a pint of blood, which she would then drink.
Whoa!
This was back in the old death.
You know the kind of gals we hang around with.
A pint's a good amount.
Yeah.
She, by the way, now is the travel editor of the Telegraph magazine. She has risen up. I don't know how much blood she's still drinking. Go on, John.
This was back in the old death rock days. And anyway, during the Oslo trip, we were backstage one night, and you ordered a whole fifth of tequila on your rider for me, and I consumed the entire thing.
Oh, my.
And also that day, I happened to lose the blackjack game to Jessamy, so Jim had drank about 20 beers, and I smashed an empty beer bottle and slashed my arm and poured it into a glass and just handed it to Jess, and she just downed it in one. I don't know if it was a pint.
Well,
I was bleeding profusely all over the place.
I mean, sometimes you have to bleed for me, baby.
Stitched up?
No, it could have been. It should have been.
Probably
But
should
then we
have
went
been.
to some party, and I was being very obstreperous, and someone kicked me down a flight of stairs. It was quite a
Same
night.
thing in Oslo.
That was Oslo.
my-
Same night. Yeah.
It kicked you down. So you have a gaping
And you
wound.
wonder why
got
black
kicked down a
metal
flight
comes
of-
from Norway. And this is poetry. Well, I mean, if they're this vicious, if the poets are this vicious in Oslo, can you only imagine what happens with black metal? Hello, no one was murdered, so you lost some blood. You got a scar. You got a good story out of it. How was the poetry reading? Secondary.
Yeah, that was the sound check.
Wonderful. Well. This is the Lydian's Ren with Tim Dahl and John Tottenham. We're just reviewing our disparate our histories which have connected over time. I'm going to recall some of the performances I do remember doing with you, which was I had been invited to All Tomorrow's Party more than just about any other act. I don't know why. Like Mars Volta had invited me, Vincent Gallo, Thurston Moore, the Melvins invited me to do Teenage Jesus. And then I demanded to do a spoken word tent. And so it was myself, John Tottenham, Kathy Unsworth, who's a friend of ours, a great British crime writer who started in rock journalism. We might get her on this soon. And I think Bibi Hansen.
And that other crime writer, whose name
Jake Arnott, I think. Yeah. So I did really the first spoken word presentation at All Tomorrow's Parties, which was, a big British music festival that went on that was, quite, and also was in America. So I remember that, and I remember the Largo. When it was you, me, Mary Warnoff of the Warhol scene and of rock and roll.
Susan Tyrrell, who did a magnificent rendition of one of your pieces.
Susan Tyrrell, who was in Bad, Fat City, various other films. And I had gotten a hold of Susan Tyrrell years earlier when Paradoxy had first come out. Ron Athey invited me to call. Susan Tyrrell had been to see some of my shows. One of the best underrated actresses, especially Fat City, monumental performance. So the first time I call Susan Tyrrell, I just say, "Hi, this is Lydia Lunch." She's like, "Oh, Lydia, I'm fucking Harry Belafonte's son, and it's great." So I invite her to do a reading, but she's got her own one-woman show up called My So-Called Career. So 10 years later, or I'm 15, I'm back in L.A., and I'm setting up the show at Largo, so I invite John Tottenham, Mary Warnoff, actress from the Warhol scene, and Eating Raoul and various other things, Rock and Roll High School, to do a reading from her book Niagara, and Susan Tyrrell, who now has had both of her legs cut off above the knees from diabetic alcoholism. She was painting, and she agreed to read from Paradoxia. She read, and I suggested she read the most horrifying story in there, and she did a great job. When she's done reading, and we have this on film, by the way, it's on Vimeo, I say to her, "Susan, we need to do like a two-woman play, very Tennessee Williams." I hate Tennessee Williams. I'm like, "You are Tennessee Williams." And she was. Anyway, she died not long after, but we did video. That was a great show that night, though. That encompassed all forms of literature. Emphasis on literature. Go on, John. Tell me some more about our life together. Tell me about the paintings, then.
Oh, yeah.
No, because I was just going to continue the thread. You're in L.A., but the painting.
Yeah, what happened? So now you're in L.A. How long have you been living here at this point?
So long.
You've been here a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, I did take a few breaks, as mentioned. I moved down to New Orleans for 3 years, and I also made the colossal mistake of living in Oregon for a couple of years.
You must have
couple
really,
years.
You must have really almost died there.
I did. But I went straight from New Orleans to Portland, which is sort of like going from the frying pan into the fridge. And I went from living in a 7-room house in New Orleans that I paid $150 a month for to a place the size of a closet.
Was that a woman that brought you there?
No, it was a woman who I was trying to get away from.
As usual. You seem to have very a difficult time with women. I don't know why. They love you at first, and then what happens? They end up not being able to bear the brunt of your beatific poetry or your misery or your fragility, or do you just get bored with them? Or all the above?
Is this true?
They usually, I think they often feel they're not getting enough out of the
experience.
Deal, yeah.
What are you getting out of it usually? Everything and more, because basically you'd probably prefer to have a girlfriend for half an hour a day and not live in. I mean, isn't that the best kind of girlfriend to have?
I got one in there. She's asleep at the moment.
Yeah, well,
it was a late night.
No wonder you didn't sleep last night. Yeah, but I mean, so you have these younger women. Why?
Not really. No.
Not always.
This is strictly an aberration.
I see.
I know. I mean, I got to say honestly, it's great to finally be involved in an age-appropriate relationship. with a woman who's half my age, because it beats being around, women who are roughly my age, 10 years younger.
Who know what they want and know you can't give it to them.
Yeah, exactly. But, no, but people...
They're too demanding. You're just not that forthcoming.
Well, it's rather tender territory, isn't it?
Tell me about then. So you're in LA, and then you decide to start painting. You take up.
Well, I've always painted. I went to art school. I went to the worst art school in London.
What was that?
It's not the worst art school there anymore, but in any event, yes, I graduated from the worst art school in London with a degree in fine art, City and Guild School of Art in Kennington, not Kensington.
What's the one in Camberwell?
Camberwell School of Art, yeah. It's around
Did you go to boarding school as a boy?
I did, yes.
Oh,
So
my
that
God.
was a formative
wait a second.
experience.
Let's talk about that. Let's go back to the origins of your trauma.
Let's really get back. Yes, a breeding ground of perversity. Yeah, I went to boarding school for 4 or 5 years.
Did you become anally fixated at that time?
No, but other people around me did. No.
Did you successfully
listen,
avoid
I
an
came
anal
over
invasion?
here.
What?
I didn't realize that molestation was such a big deal until I came to the States. I thought it was just, part of growing up.
So the cliche for us Yankees, is that England has got a epidemic of.
Oh, it does, but they just used to it. They've had hundreds more years. They've had 1,000 more years of it.
Oh, that's it. I misunderstood what you said. Okay, yeah.
Especially boarding schools. I mean, what a nightmare. Why do parents subject children to those things?
I used to wonder about that.
I mean, they must have really hated you.
I mean, not only
they
that,
hate their
but
children.
my parents. My dad went too, and he had a terrible time.
And so, yeah,
he
could
had
take
to inflict it on me.
It's almost impossible to sever the chain of these
abuse.
Of abuse, basically.
That's why we live. That's why we live to be more than 14.
It's a slow.
It's a boarding school.
Boarding school.
Nightmare.
Yeah.
Is that where your perversity first began showing its delectable head?
Absolutely, because I was having my sexual awakening while I was surrounded by pretty boys, and then I'd go home.
Is that called a head start?
For vacation, and I'd be around girls, and it all got a bit confusing,
When was the first time you had sex with a girl, if you don't mind me asking? I mean, did you have sex with boys first?
Not full-on sex, just
mucking around.
Mucking around.
Right. So was it hard to make the transition?
Very innocent and romantic it was, actually. Very romantic.
I mean, it's such a romantic poetry. Was it difficult to make the transition?
No, not at all. But you see, where I grew up in the sticks, and I was considered a figure of fun by all the girls there.
Really?
There was this one girl who I was madly attracted to, and I ran into her one day on the train, and she said to me, "Why don't you talk to me?" She said, "Why don't you talk to me anymore, John?" I said, "Well, I would, but you don't talk to me. Why don't you talk to me?" And she said, "Well, I would, but every time you walk into the pub, everyone starts laughing at you."
Oh!
But this was during the punk era.
This
was during the punk era, and I was the only. I just didn't have any friends.
Well, because you had your own, you always had your own style. I mean, you inhabit this other realm that is you can't define by generation, even gender. I mean, it's almost like you are a throwback to the classic romantic poet of another era. Your look, your writing, your whole countenance. So that then eventually women like myself and Jessamy found you extremely attractive.
As soon as I moved to London, everything changed overnight.
Because you wore suits, and women love suits, no matter how natty or nappy they are. You're in a suit, you're automatically defined as other, and suddenly all these hotties, well, at least two of us were like, John Tottenham, tell me a little poem, honey. I'll give you a little honey for a little poem, sonny boy.
But remember, I didn't even write poems then.
Yeah, I know, but, prose was good enough. Actually, the prose was fantastic. Yeah.
But so to answer your question, it was not very difficult making that transition.
Have you ever thought about going back to the handsome pretty boys just for a change of pace?
No, because I got
face?
that out of my system at a very young age, honestly. I haven't thought about it since then.
Once you learn to clench your sphincter hard enough, nothing will go in there. Well, let's not talk about that, because I'm not sure I didn't ever put anything. I mean, we're not going there. I'm not sure.
Well, you've been there now. You weren't there before.
Well, you've been there as well, my friend. Don't worry about it. There's one of the many things we share in common. We're not. There's a certain place in time, usually late at night, where we drop all facade, all premise, and just get down to what poetry is really all about. Physical poetry. I mean, beat poetry. I mean, beating off. I mean, beat poetry to me was always a physical thing. It had nothing to do with the cadence. So, Your paintings,
My
after your
paintings.
fine art education.
I should have stuck to that, honestly, because it's a much more lucrative and enjoyable pursuit than writing. But I don't feel I honestly have anything new to bring to the table. I think there are thousands of people who are better painters and drawers than me.
Oh, I agree. There's no
And-
better poet, but I think there are better painters and
But
drawers. But your
if I didn't
themes.
do what I do with my writing, I don't think anyone else would do it, regardless of how unrewarding it is.
But your subject matter in the paintings. I mean, for a while you were obsessed with women with walkers.
Well, I wasn't very obsessed.
Well, you
with
did
them.
quite a few paintings.
I
of
just
them.
thought I just liked drawing women, and it just made it more provocative or entertaining to have them holding walkers.
'Cause eventually we all will.
In elaborate Edward Hopper type sun-drenched rooms.
But you were selling paint. You did sell some
yeah,
paintings.
so did I. I just had an art show in November. Well, it only closed this month, actually.
Where was
I
that?
sold half of it.
Fantastic.
At Bergamot Station in
Oh, that's
LA,
grand.
yeah.
That's very
did very well.
reputable.
All right.
I've had-
Congratulations,
I
John
have art
Tottenham.
shows at reputable galleries, but I only do them and I only produce work when I'm up at shows.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
So
really,
what was the last show? What was the theme there? Was there a theme?
Did you see any of my drawings?
I've seen the walkers.
No, drawings.
No,
They're all
the drawings, I haven't
you
seen the
should check 'em
drawings.
out. Oh, well, you don't
These
have
are all
them.
drawings at Bergamot
They're all
Station
drawings.
closed.
They're just
Okay.
drawings of kind of desolate, small town scenes.
Oh, beautiful.
And industrial scenes, and with my text scrawled across.
Oh, that's
Okay.
grand. So it's the physical manifestation of the
Yeah,
desperation
but I used
of your
to
poetry.
just do the drawings, and people said to me, "You're supposed to be a writer. You should write on your drawings. Everyone's doing it. People will
Fantastic
buy
idea.
them."
Can't wait
And
to
so
see
I
them.
did, and
Great.
so they
And
started
here we go.
selling better.
So the hybrid of your poetry and your
Yeah, it is.
visual art, yeah.
It is.
I think it's very important. I mean, to me, words are always were and still remain, the ultimate form of communication. I mean, whether it's with music or not, or whether it's on paintings, like even a photograph. My photographs have titles that represent something beyond just the 5 words that may, present itself. I think words are still the very important aspect to art in any form. You present so a lot of your stuff about the inertia, about procrastination,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful subject matter. I mean, I was trying to explain to them what you were like before they heard you, and it's bizarre because I could only compare you to really downer comedians.
Right.
Because I think your stuff. What's interesting when John performs, it starts out so dry, but there comes a crack somewhere where suddenly the first titter in the audience, and then it becomes absolutely fucking hilarious because you're relentless in the delivery, which is basically about the disappointment of all life on this planet. No matter how beautiful it might have been at one point, it will die and you will fail.
And what I appreciated about hearing you perform and read last night is, in a weird way, almost like a great punchline to a joke. Everyone kind of knows where it's going,
Yes.
but they don't know how. You kind of paint yourself in a corner, and then in a very unpredictable, clever way, it unravels, but from a very special angle, which is constantly novel. And that's why people, to the point where it's like a seduction with the audience, and it's a back and forth.
Because everybody feels themselves in that corner
and
eventually.
they're
in one
rooting.
sense
They're
or another.
rooting for you at a certain point.
At first, they're like it's kind of like, oh God, no, this is really dry. Who is this failure loser? But then, not even midway through the set, everybody knows they have these feelings, and they're in that. They're now in your corner. You painted yourself into a corner, which everybody is now in. And so I love the transition because I've seen it happen many times with your work. I mean, I love it as a sociological study because at first, and a lot of people may never have heard you. So here, like last night, you're in the desert. Some people might have heard you. Some people might be there for me. We have very different styles, very different presentations. Speak about the frying pan and the fridge. There we go. But you nail forward with enough, vindication that there comes that moment. It's about a quarter way in where suddenly the worm turns, and the first hitter happens, and then everybody's just, yes, we've been there. Of course, you still stand alone, as you will remain, as you've always been, as we always will be. So
I think this is a good opportunity. You want to read another one?
Okay.
I think you should.
Would you like a love poem?
I would love
Because
a love.
that's,
The love poems.
I only
yeah.
have about 3 subjects.
Yes, they're all miserable. No, you're the king of misery, and it's a beautiful title to wear. I wish I had the crown appropriate to put on your head.
Yes, my dear, we have each other. That's what worries me. I wouldn't focus on your flaws if you did not call yourself mine. You are the living embodiment of my failure, another symptom of my decline. But darling, please don't let our love ever die, because if it does, I'll be shattered by all the time I've wasted keeping it alive.
That was John Tottenham with one of his many romantic love poems. His new book is called The Hate Poems, featuring a fluffy little kitten on the cover, just as a testament to his own contrarian nature.
Well,
No, he is, I don't want to say a failed romantic, but he is a failed romantic. I mean, he's extremely romantic, but most romance ends in failure, and he is the man to document this descent into, once again, loneliness and onanism and masturbation. He admits it as well as I do. And he will be the last man standing in a corner with probably his pants down around his ankles, staring into a mirror which has been cracked by his own reflection into an infinity of nightmares which he has or has not lived out, which will become his tombstone eventually. But probably he'll have to also donate his body to Gunther von Hagen, I'm not sure. It's a poem for you, John Tottenham. A living poet if ever there was.
To do nothing in this day and age when so much pointless work is being produced could almost be considered an achievement. It all compares most unfavorably with my own imaginary body of work. Since we've talked about masturbating so much, perhaps I should recite a poem on the subject.
I would love you to share that with us.
With my love in my cold, old, dry hands, I privatize my urges, launching myself into blank interiority, falling into shapelessness. All the remaining energy leaves my body. It is strenuous, abrasive, and draining work, and it is beginning to feel absurd in a way that it never did before. Perhaps even this uninspired pleasure will be denied me as I grow old.
John Tottenham from the Inertia Variations. So yours kind of signature piece, the Inertia Variations, was that your first book? Or
It was.
It was
yes.
your first book. And that came out when? Do you remember?
Well, there was first edition came out in 2005, and then there was a new edition with about two-thirds as longer, came out in 2010.
Well, Jim Thirlwell got a hold of this as our mutual friend, and he sent it to Matt Johnson of The. And Matt Johnson was quite a huge pop star in the UK in the early 80s. I mean, his big song was This Is the Day. It was huge. Yeah. But Matt Johnson, much like you claim to be, is a heinous procrastinator.
Well, he's a chronic procrastinator himself. That's why he related to the work, and it actually took him a really long time to put it out, because he actually played me when I first met him. I went over to his studio in London, and he said, "Go and sit in that room, and I'm going to let the tape roll."
And he was reading your work from the Inertia
his interpretation of it, but it's very different from the way I recited. He does it in a very gentle, soothing way, which is lovely, with a soundscape laid over it or under it. And so he said, "Go and sit in the studio and listen to my rendition of your immortal verses." And I went and sat there, and I honestly fell asleep after 15 minutes because it was so soporific. It was beautiful, but it's very sleep-inducing. Okay. Yeah.
Well, and Matt Johnson's presentation, but he could relate to on I mean, this is a man that I don't think has released an album in 15 years.
But he has actually done a lot more than he claims. He's released several soundtracks.
Okay, well, there you go. But he's kept out of the pop eye.
Yeah, but he's done a lot of other things. He's been very busy working on issues of conservation in East London.
Oh, that's great, but it still takes him a long time to get anything together.
Yeah.
So he was a kindred spirit. But then he had quite some success with this, didn't he? Did he take the Inertia Variations to the stage?
Well, he made a film out of it. It's a autobiographical film. Someone else directed it, but it's just about his sort of years of inertia, 15 years or thereabouts, and he uses his rendition of my immortal verses as a kind of verbal soundtrack that is woven throughout the film.
You still manage to get up every day, John.
I do. I get up very early nowadays.
I get up very early.
I get up at, I'm
6
old. I
o'clock,
wake up automatically at 7 o'clock, and I get up and I write for 3 or 4 hours.
And there you go. So where is all this genius hiding? Where are all these?
I've been working on a novel for the last 3 years. That's all I've been doing.
Well, let me tell you, 3 years is nothing in the scape of some writers like Hubert Selby, who took 16 years to write his last book.
That's worrying, because I'm not sure if I got that's worrying, but...
But the thing with writing, this is what's beautiful. You get up at 7 a.m. and for 3 hours you write, whether it's one line or 100 pages.
Exactly.
This is the way something gets accomplished.
Yeah.
The way I wrote Paradoxia, which took me 3 months. I never wrote a novel. It's not a novel. It's a memoir. It's a very different thing. I don't understand how to write novels. I don't even read them. But I wrote the last chapter first because I was already in that state, which was what I read last night. And then in order to fill in, it was like I would imagine postcard examples of experiences that had some kind of meaning, and I imagined to just fill in the blank of the postcard. That was my trick to writing.
I don't write chronologically. It's not written in order.
Well, I wrote the last chapter first.
Yeah, I got the last chapter too. But, I realized that I have no plot. I have no grasp of plot, character, or dialogue, and so I decided to start writing a novel. It's time.
Because you have nothing that within it is usually contained. Well, and look, some of my favorite books are not novels anyway. I mean, if you look at Selena, you look at Henry Miller, these are not novels. These are just endless journals that sometimes go on and run on sentences for 10 pages. And it's the poetry within there. I mean, there are 10 pages of Henry Miller, Tropic of Capricorn, that I go back to every year that I can't believe I even took up a pen after reading that at the age of 12 or 13. But you go back and you go, this is the best piece of obsessive romantic poetry ever written. It didn't stop me, though, because being a romantic myself.
I just feel I have to write a novel. I mean, it's...
Because when you respect the novel form. Well...
I don't know why.
But
there's nothing sacred about it. But
and why does it have to be a novel? Why can't it be?
I don't know if it would be classified as one, strictly speaking.
And it doesn't have to be, because, I think that your prose needs to be exposed, and I think people are really going to love it. I don't think it needs to be homogenized into a generic art form. Call the novel. This is the Lydian Spin with Tim Dahl and John Tottenham. You can go and watch some of his incredible live performances online. That would be John Tottenham, not the football player, but the poet. The Inertia Variations, his new book is called The Hate Poems. And do yourself a favor. Just suffer through it, as he has. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. It's been delightful.